Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls all across the world. This is Scott Montgomery for the Small Town Mercer. Today I'm going to address the issue of trickle down economics. Yesterday I was looking at news and I caught part of ex President Trump's speech, and I took part, I also then read some criticism of his speech by the opposing media that opposes his viewpoint largely. And I started thinking to myself, we're kind of fighting over the past here. And I don't mean the past in relations to whether or not Trump is going to be president again or not. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about we're arguing over the past of our economic future. Our economic future is not really going to depend on the things that we're talking about today. Socialism or return to Reaganism or things like that. We're moving into a whole different arena as far as economics goes. And I've been presenting that in my last few videos. And so today I'm going to talk about trickle down economics and how largely it is a tool of both political parties, and its time has come and gone. So let's get started, okay? I'm going to do a little bit of history here. I'm going to talk about the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, and then I'm going to talk about cryptocurrency and where I think that may lead. All right, so the Republican Party largely is an offshoot of the old Federalist Party. All right, and this is Alexander Hamilton, George Washington's Secretary of the Treasury. And, largely, I just said that. The old Federalist Party is going to basically utilize the banking system and is going to try to have a partnership between banking and government. And banking and government is going to stimulate or help stimulate business development. All right. Business development, okay? So, Alexander Hamilton writes a letter before Congress, the report on manufacturers. And in that report, he's going to argue that we need to stimulate and develop our economic manufacturing sector, because remember, at the time, we're largely a trading nation and a farming nation. So you have the coastal areas do a lot of trading, and we're trading and importing goods, and we're exporting raw materials and farm stuff. And we're also importing into our country, largely from England, goods, services, mostly goods, not really services, but goods, clothing and durable goods, things like that. Okay? So now we're starting to manufacture things. Ironically, one of the first things we manufactured in this country were guns, which is why we had guns and were able to fight the revolution. But it's going to move on from that, correct? We're going to get into steam engines and then so forth and so on. And that's going to lead to river boats and all types of boats. And then we're going to build canals. And then that's not going to be fast enough. People are moving out west. So now we're going to start to put railroads in and develop the rail engines or the railroad cars and railroad tracks. And then eventually after that, we're going to put in roads and highways. And, as the century rolls along, you're going to have ironclad ships eventually to do a lot of shipping, and then towards the end of the 19th century, going to start to see the automobile. Very late. Okay, so business is going to stimulate all of that. Think of this as the stimulation of technologies of the future, and that was a big era, the 19th century. And so by stimulating business development, what is that going to do? That's going to create employment. All right, employment. The business owners are going to develop their products, and then they're going to sell them to the public for a profit, and they're going to need employees to build and manage these products for them. Okay, and what I mean by that is distribute them and keep books and all that stuff, right? Okay, so that's employment stimulation. As the century moves along, we're going to get to the Whig Party. The Federalists no longer exist, so it turns into the Whig Party. And the Whig Party is going to want to use this thing called tariffs to protect our industry, right? And also to make sure that we can sell goods overseas cheaper than what they can be made overseas. So we're going to try to do that. We're going to have a robust shipping, and we're also going to send raw materials overseas, still, like we were doing all along. So this is going to require a lot of employment. Now, farming and agriculture was largely labor intensive. But as mechanization were to come along, a lot of the crops that are grown, let's say in northern states, fruits and grains and things like that, some vegetables, they're going to be harvested by these machines. Cash crops like sugar, tobacco, cotton, not so much. We don't have machinery that can mass develop or mass accumulate those goods. So they're still going to use labor-intensive measures to procure those crops. So as a result of that, slavery is going to die down in the north, but not so much in the south. Now, as we move west, you're going to see a lot of people heading out towards the agricultural areas, and what was formerly known as the West or the Midwest is now going to develop into larger cities and larger manufacturing centers. So that's going to start to move out. And so the railroads are going to be very crucial for that movement, as well as raw materials being mined and brought back. We're going to have more iron ore come into existence, so the development of steel is going to make tall buildings possible. All right. And so a lot of businesses are going to be able to relocate to cities. Manufacturing centers are going to be able to also spring up in the cities. And mining and agriculture are going to move out west. Another thing that's going to start to develop after the Civil War is the oil industry. So that's going to make a better fuel than steam and all the other previous coal used for fuel. And so that's going to further develop manufacturing processes. And obviously the automobile comes along and other machines come along that run on these fuels. All right. So what happens towards the end of the 19th century is you have this thing called the robber baron, right? Oh, I hope I spelled that right. Anyway, the robber baron, I'm not sure if it's got one or two, I think it's one. So these robber barons are these large industrialists that hoard a lot of wealth. You see them live in their giant mansions, and you could still see them today. And, Carnegie's, the Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers, so forth and so on. So they're going to accumulate all this wealth. They're going to have these giant fortunes. And they're going to acquire, a lot of the businesses. They're going to control what, 70, 80% of the economy. And a lot of them are going to be monopolistic. They're going to buy out their competition. You look at Standard Oil. Um, once they're broken up, they're going to break up into Exxon, Mobil, several oil companies. Esso, they're not called Exxon, then they're called Esso. But yeah. I mean, there's Marathon is another one. So they're going to break up into all of its constituent, and so these robber barons are going to be a result of a failure in trickle down economics, right? And so what's going to happen is the Progressive Party is going to come along, and the Progressive Party is going to take shape in the Republican wing in the late 19th century, right? And they're going to start to regulate these industries, in particular the food industry, because food manufacturing is disgusting in those days. Lots of bacteria, lots of issues. So that's where it's going to start. And regulation and what is this? As regards to the robber barons, we're going to have something that I can put in both boxes. You're going to have, anti-monopoly. So we're going to start the antitrust movement, basically. And we're going to bust all the trusts, all these giant corporations that are holding all the wealth. And so that movement is going to branch off into both of these. Okay, so in the 19th century, the Democratic Party actually starts out as the Democratic Republican Party. And this party is largely a confederatory party. Right? It loves the confederation, the idea of confederation, the idea of a weak central government, not a central bank, no taxation, no government involvement in anything. It's every man is a kind of a, like I said before, a free agent, kind of sort of like we are today. Every man works for himself. He has his own farm, his own business. It doesn't take a lot of capital, you know. Burgeoning or new technologies are not funded or helped in any way by the government. They have to make it on their own. And so, as a result of that political movement was very good for the first 50 years or so of the 19th century, because you're going to have a lot of land, a lot of agriculture develop, and a lot of freedom, not a lot of, I would say, not a lot of panics, not a lot of wealth disparity, things like that. But the problem with that, and why this party starts to die out in the 1830s, is that it's a very rural party, and it doesn't allow for a lot of innovation. Okay? So the Democratic Party is going to see this, and they're going to seize this, so they're going to split. So the southern portion of the Democratic Party is going to largely stay that way. They're going to stay more or less the Democratic Republican Party. Whereas the Northern Democratic Party is going to split, and they're going to start to focus on the worker. Okay, they're going to focus on the fact that workers don't get paid much. They get paid long hours, or they work long hours, sorry. They don't get paid much. They work long hours. The conditions are not necessarily safe. You also have men and women working together, and it's very difficult for them to raise their children and their family. So basically, the children work too. because they're not making a lot of wages. And then as the union, so they're going to favor unions, right? Okay, they're going to favor that and child labor laws. So they're going to want kids to go to public school. So we're going to start public schools. Okay, and eventually safety, more pay. Um, Not necessarily women working because it's unsafe then. So maybe the woman should not work in a lot of these jobs because it's very, very unsafe, very demanding. A lot of them get injured. So eventually you're going to want to see some medical will come into play. I don't think that's going to come into play for quite some time, but eventually it comes into play. And then um, finally you start to look at this, the Republican side, which starts to see this taking effect and wages rising. So they're going to help businesses by being pro-immigration. So we'll put up here, because I'm running out of room, pro-immigration. Now, this is immigration from Europe, because Europe is largely unstable at this point. You're going, between a democratic government and the old kings and royalty. Not all of Europe is consolidated yet. Germany is not consolidated yet. Italy is not consolidated yet. Um, you have this socialist movement going on in England. They're still fighting over that. But in England, you still have royalty and a king, so it's not a stretch for the government to have most of the wealth and trickle that down either. And we'll get to that in a minute. So as a result of that, Democratic Party is going to be anti-immigrant immigration. And that's going to last until, I would say, probably the 1990s, 80s, and 90s. So, anyway, here you go. So these are the two political parties. This party starts in the 18th century. This party starts in the 19th century. And if you look at today's rhetoric, even in the newspapers today, we're still pretending that we're in the 18th and 19th centuries. Where we're going to help the workers and all this other stuff and blah, blah, blah. And not realizing that, we've moved beyond that, haven't we? We're like, the one that cracks me up the most, we're going to fight for $15 an hour. Who makes $15 an hour? Do engineers make $15 an hour? Do professionals make $15 an hour? Does your doctor make $15 an hour? Who makes $15 an hour? Your lawyer? How about your politician? Oh, sorry. Don't want to be too ridiculous. What are you, drunk there, Scott? Yeah. All right, so who works for $15 an hour? The factory worker at Ford or GM? No. That's a pay cut to them. Who makes $15 an hour? Well, the low-skilled workers. Right. Have you gone to McDonald's lately? What do they have in there? Oh, one of those boards that you order your food and pay it right there at the kiosk? Or do you drive up to the teller or whatever, to the window and get your food and drive off? So does that mean that those people are going to make $15 an hour? We have an illegal immigration problem in this country. Do illegal immigrants make $15 an hour? I doubt it. I don't know what they make, but I bet you they make less than $15 an hour because they are undocumented. And we don't know what they make because they're not documented. If they're not documented, we don't know what they make. And it's a good thing because they probably make money. They all live together in an affordable house, and then they send that money back down to Mexico or whatever country they come from, Africa, whatever African nation they come from, or even Eastern Europe, maybe. I don't know. Or other areas, Asia. A lot of people from the Philippines and the West Coast send money home. Vietnam, same thing. So that's our system. It's 18th and 19th century, and it doesn't address the future. What is the future? Well, first of all, let me wrap this up. This was supposed to be about trickle down economics. So here's the Republican Party. Their trickle down economics ends when we get to, I would say, the Reagan years, the Bush years, the Clinton years, Bush years, whatever, because what happens in those years? We're off the gold standard now. So now when you stimulate, it takes a lot of stimulation because, like I've said in previous videos, you're in a more technical world now. Those people make a lot more money than they did in the old economy, right? So during the Reagan years, you start to see computers emerging, Apple, Microsoft, those things, okay? And in the 90s, they start to, by the late 90s, you're getting this tech innovation and then eventually a tech bubble in which you starting to see the internet and cell phones and automated banking getting more and more. You had the ATM in the 80s too, but now you're going to do more online stuff. By the 2000s, you're going to be doing that. So you got between Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush, there's a lot of tech innovation. There's a tech bubble. The market crashes, and we had too much of a glut of technology and didn't know how to use a lot of it. Didn't have an application of it because we still had mostly a traditional world. And now we've had the tech innovation show up, right? Now you've got Apple, Google, and all that stuff going on. Facebook, Twitter, blah, blah, blah. That's been going on for a long time now. And now those people have so much power, they're able to regulate and censor and do all this stuff. And they largely control the economy because they own most of the economy. Amazon, and now you're looking at all the traditional businesses that used to exist in this country, and they're either moving overseas, or they're going bankrupt, or they're not important anymore. And so here comes Trump. He tries to bring them back. There's World War III going on because when you bring those jobs back, yes, it helps the working man because we now have better paying jobs, but it actually hurts the bottom line of corporations because now they got to pay more expenses than they do by bringing those jobs back. Trump forces their hand with the tariff issue, and now they got to, it's cheaper to bring them back, but it's more expensive for them in the short term. In the long term, I think it'll probably work out, but in the short term could be 4 or 5 years. I don't think corporations want to pay those added higher expenses for 4 or 5 years. It may, it may hurt in the long run. It may hurt the professional crowd. It's going to help the working crowd and the less sophisticated workers. It's going to help them. But the top line workers, which the economy had been heading in that direction for the last 10, 15 years, it's going to hurt their bottom line. So those are the ones that are fighting against that. So now fast forward today, you've got Trump and his philosophy, and you've got the opposition to Trump, whether it be some of the Republican Party or most of the Democratic Party. And in my opinion, they're fighting a war that over territory that is not important anymore. That is the past. It's almost like, we need this Navy base on this island in Hawaii. Let's fight a war over Hawaii. And in reality, we have an Air Force now. We don't need that naval base in Hawaii. So fighting a war over something like that, not important. Think about that. We needed Puerto Rico, we needed Hawaii, we needed Guam for naval bases. Well, China solved that problem by making their own islands. So how important are these territories? Not very. I think we should let them be autonomous. Okay, so now let's get to the crypto world so I can wrap this up. The crypto world is a largely libertarian world. It's largely a constitutional world because now we're not concerned so much with money, we're concerned with rights. And that's the real role of government, is to make sure everybody has equal rights, not picking and choosing people that you want to have rights because you think some other group is oppressing them. That's not how the world works. Everybody has a right to their own opinions and feelings, and the government shouldn't dictate what your beliefs should be. The government should dictate whether or not you have fair and equal opportunity, not fair and equal outcomes. So you need to educate people on how to be responsible, not what to think and what to believe. All right? So that's where this comes in. Libertarian because, people have a right. And now I'm not saying that, you have a right to run around drunk and naked and jump on people. I'm not saying that. That's part of this. That's part of civil discord. Civil discord is what the government should be focused on. And what I mean by that is civil, not that you have to believe something, but that you have to act a certain way. If you feel that you were oppressed, you have no right to blow up cities, let's say. Okay? You address your oppression with discussion and have a public meeting and bring all sides together and have a discussion instead of a food fight and riots and accusing people of, killing you or something. Being offended by a statue, being offended by history, being offended by any number of things means that you're too immature to be running anything, never, especially this country. So we need to follow a constitution and do what the constitution says as far as addressing our grievances. All right? Libertarian. Everybody has a right to their own beliefs and the way they live, period. And that includes money. We have a right to have our money gain in value every year, not lose value every year. And finally, this notion of a tea party, I like that. And what do I mean by the tea party? This notion that the people have more power than the government. All right? That's what I mean by that. So think about it this way. Cryptocurrency already exists. Bitcoin already exists. Ethereum already exists. All of those coins, not all of them, not Ethereum, but most of them have a finite number. Bitcoin, there's about 18 billion Bitcoin out there. There's only going to be 21 billion Bitcoin ever made. And so if you hold Bitcoin, you're going to be highly wealthy, much more so than most people. Does that mean everybody else is going to starve? No. Why? Because you have other altcoins that have a value not only compared to the US dollar, but compared to Bitcoin. You have Ethereum, and guess what? You have other coins. What are some of the latest ones, like Polkadot or Cardano or some Tether, things like that. There are other coins, many other coins. All right? Those are some of the big ones right now. They have a value in regards to the dollar, but guess what? Cardano, Polkadot, Tether, all these other coins, they have a value in comparison to Ethereum. Ethereum has a value in comparison to Bitcoin. All right? So I see Bitcoin someday as being like your house. And I've said this on previous videos. It is the most valuable coin, and it is an asset that you probably will not spend. You will borrow against it and pay it back because its value will always be increasing because it's finite and it's worth way more than all the other altcoins. So therefore, its value will always increase versus Ethereum and versus the other altcoins. That's what I believe, okay, because it's a high store of value and people are really buying it right now. Ethereum will always have a great value. But guess what most of these coins are doing? They're actually gaining over the dollar because the dollar is less and less and less valuable because there is no discipline. You have trickle down. Ever since the Great Depression, everything has been stimulate the economy from Herbert Hoover to Franklin Roosevelt to George Bush to Barack Obama. Stimulate, stimulate, stimulate. And run up a deficit. And I ran that video yesterday. So I posted it yesterday, actually. So stimulate, stimulate, stimulate means prices are going to be like a sponge and they're going to suck up all that money and things are going to get more and more expensive. Now think about this. You were given a stimulus check last year for $400. You were given another one for $600. You're about to get another one for what? $1,400. So that's what, about $2,400 in stimulus. Is that, you don't have to work the rest of the year now? No. Why? Well, prices don't stop going up, do they? You don't have, your bills don't stop, do they? You know, that's how an economy works. Somebody has to get paid, so somebody has money. All right? But in the crypto world, since your money is always gaining value as time goes on, compared to the dollar and even compared to each other, you're going to make interest on your money. And so why are you going to need an IRS? Why are you going to need a Federal Reserve? The country already has a treasury. I see a day where cryptocurrency, you're actually going to, instead of paying taxes, you're actually going to loan money. In lieu of taxes, everybody's going to, the treasury is going to let you know how much money, here's our budget, here's our operating expenses, and this is how much money we need. Great, we'll give it to you based on our wealth, what wealth we have. But guess what? It's going to be loaned to you. We're going to loan you the money. You pay us back. And if you can't meet your budget, government, guess what? Next year, when tax day comes along, when we loan you the money, the interest rate goes up. Maybe last year it was 5%, this year it's 8%. And you got to pay it all back, all of it. So, you know, when your money is making money for you, that actually probably nets you more money than it would if the government, you know, gives you that Ponzi scheme called Social Security. By the time you're ready to retire, you would have more money to retire on than you did when you paid taxes and survived on Social Security for 35 years and got your Medicare expenses paid for. You can probably afford that and then some and still have more money left in the bank. Anyway, that's where I think this is heading. So you can forget about socialism. You can forget about trickle-down economics, whether it trickles down from big businesses or it trickles down from the government, which is how these two parties operate. That's not going to be a necessity anymore. I think in this system, you're going to make money, you're going to pay it back, and the country's going to be successful because they'll have to live within their means. They're not going to have unnecessary projects that are going to waste money, like Green New Deals or ridiculous trade deals or giving money to foreign countries. Because if we all adopt this Ethereum is the same price everywhere. And if everybody has Ethereum or everybody has Cardano or whatever altcoin they use, people won't need to immigrate to this country to make a living. They'll have the same money, the same finances in their country as we do in ours. And so they won't need to do that. We'll have manufacturing here, they'll have manufacturing there. That's how it's going to work. All right? So anyway, thank you for watching. This is Scott Montgomery for the Small Town Mercer. My next video, I'm going to show you, government. There's some governments around the world that see what's coming. They see what I'm saying is right. It's correct. And so they're trying to hedge against that. They're trying to come up with their own altcoin. Well, like I said, they're trying to stop this from happening. And I don't think it's going to work. And in my next video, I'm going to explain why. Thank you for watching and have a good day.